Morning. story. Big name he carries, big expectations on him. What's the way you're going to be treating him as a first-year rookie in Formula One, Gunther?
He's treated like every rookie. I mean, we need to try to grow him as much as possible to lead him into F1 for his future. You know, he's a young guy. He's got a great future in front of him, and we are the first step for him. So what we are trying to do to introduce him to Formula One as a driver, as a personality and everything, and that is our aim for the next 2 to 3 years.
Yeah.
So to make him ready for the future.
Yeah. I mean, he is his own man, and he's earned this place on merit, and yet there will be an extra spotlight, there's no doubt.
Yeah, absolutely. He's called Schumacher, you know, but like these things come with a plus and a minus. Sometimes people will be critical, sometimes, but that I think drives him more to be successful. He doesn't want to live off the name, he wants to live off his results. And he has shown that. He won GP3 2 years ago, he's leading F2 championship, so it's not like that he finished 12th or 14th in F2. You know, he's leading it. So I think he has got enough confidence to know that he can do it. It's just like, there is a lot of talented drivers in here, you know, they're the best of the best, so it will be tough, but I think he has got the potential to be a world champion in the future.
Yeah. Alongside Nikita Mazepin, young Russian, so 2 rookies. Do you need a new chapter at this team maybe? You had a good start, tough couple of years, but will this bring a little bit of extra fresh enthusiasm?
Absolutely, and that is part of why we did it as well. You know, we need to rekindle it. You know, we need, as you said, we had last year was difficult performance-wise. This year, performance-wise, economically, the pandemic, the whole thing, it's just a little bit. You know, there is not the vibe there as it was there. So bringing fresh air in, you know, always helps. You know, I'm not saying that the drivers are bad, but it's just if you do just always the same, you never really get going again. And all the guys in the team are very happy to see young drivers. We know there are challenges with young drivers, and there will be many next year. But it's good, you know, because if you have challenges, you get also opportunity. So we try to take the opportunity with them to prepare them for 22 when the new regulation with the new car comes along.
Okay, we know Pietro Fittipaldi, deputy.
thank you to everybody at Williams for their support in giving me this incredible opportunity to race for Mercedes this weekend. I am still absolutely 100% a Williams driver. I'm going to use this opportunity to learn from the best.
Brisbane Centre, Ernie A, Echo Romeo, November, India, Echo Alpha minus 3,900 feet. Ernie A, Echo Romeo, November, India, Echo Alpha minus Brisbane Centre, continue as planned. Altimeter 29.902.
Chip. So this gets rid of the Intel chips from the previous MacBooks and kind of Apple going it alone. Ryan, are companies like Intel and AMD quivering in their boots, or do they have nothing to really worry about in this situation?
If you're going for a MacBook Air or even Ultrabook, chances are the only kind of performance you want is for like web browsing, streaming video, kind of Word documents, emails, like maybe a little bit of game stuff, but it's not priority. So yeah, I think we've got to a stage now where all Intel and AMD latest laptops can do that. So yeah, I agree. The performance jump isn't really, it's great to have, don't get me wrong, but it's not like the game-changing moment. Battery life though, I struggle to see many laptops these days hit 10 hours of like ongoing use. So to see, have you seen any tests for MacBook Air? Did it reach 18 hours?
Yeah, so kind of in video playback, about 19 hours.
Yeah.
Just kind of using it as a regular laptop, comfortably through a work day with about 60% left.
Yeah, and I think that's going to be the biggest impact on people using, right? Like you can go to work with it fully charged and not have to worry about moving that battery all day.
Yeah.
But first, I just want to highlight that Apple's not building its new Apple Silicon processor from scratch completely. It's not all their design. They're licensing the kind of process architecture from ARM, and ARM's been around for a while, quite a long time now, but this is kind of the first time we've seen it in laptops, making their own tweaks, their own optimizations, and then creating their own Apple M1 chip. So yeah, kind of these new laptop MacBook chips are very similar to kind of how these iPhone chips are made.
So what are the main benefits of the M1 chip over, say, an Intel Core i5 and AMD's alternatives?
So the main benefits of using ARM architecture is they're basically more power efficient and they don't heat up as much. So as you've seen with the new MacBook Air, it doesn't need a fan because it's not overheating like these other old processors do. And also it means battery life is a lot longer. Also, Apple seems to have so far shown that their processing speeds have dramatically increased compared to their old Intel processors, and also integrated graphics.
Could AMD and Intel just start making their own ARM-based tech, like the M1?
So there's nothing stopping them from doing it, because like I said before, ARM licenses these processors to other companies, like we've seen Apple, Snapdragon, even NVIDIA, all license their processors. So there's nothing stopping Intel and AMD. Obviously, Intel will want to push its own x86 platform because that's what it thinks, and it's also recently launched the Intel 8 Field processor, what they call a hybrid processor. I think that is their competitor to ARM, because it's kind of, they've got battery efficient cores in. It's not all about performance. But from what I've seen so far, in its early days, obviously, it's not quite where ARM is. ARM has better battery efficiency still. And also, again, the power efficiency means you don't have to have a fan in a lot of cases, while Intel, even though Intel Lakefield is more battery efficient, it's still going to potentially heat up. So even though I think Intel for now will try and push this Lakefield thing, because it's going to be in the Surface Neo as well, the foldable tablet device coming out. So I think they're going to put a lot of things behind that to compete before going on. But again, never say never. For AMD, I think is more likely. AMD has already created like data centers using ARM architecture, so it's not as if they haven't entered this world before. So I wouldn't rule out AMD launching their own ARM processor. But at the same time, the Ryzen 4000 processors are doing really well. I think Intel and AMD are both excelling really good at the high-end kind of creative-focused gaming processors. And I'm not sure they'll want to switch to ARM for that. It'll be interesting when Apple launches the M2 or M3 processors for like the iMac Pro, the 16-inch MacBook Pro, because we haven't really seen many, for any ARM-based laptops using a high-end performance. So I think Intel and AMD will maybe have a lead for that until we'll see with Apple, I don't know. But I think Intel and AMD will keep doing what they're doing now, rather than switching to ARM and just throwing it all away. Because I think what we're going to see is ARM taking over like the Ultrabook, entering the Ultrabook range, the like affordable Ultrabook and Chromebooks. We've already seen Acer launcher announce a Chromebook based on ARM. While I think these x86 this platform isn't going to disappear. It's going to be going for high-end laptops more, I think. And also, I think Intel and AMD are going to be a bit more hesitant to jump to ARM architecture because there's so many issues with Windows still. I reviewed like the Samsung Galaxy S, really good laptop design, really good performance, but it's got software issues. So I think until Windows can sort those issues, it doesn't make sense to transfer completely over to ARM. Obviously, that's not an issue for Apple because they use their own operating software, use macOS, and they can put all their resources into improving this for ARM architecture from forwards. But Windows has got to juggle like all these different kind of laptops. So I don't think it makes sense right now, but don't rule it out.
And Apple hasn't, of course, switched entirely away from Intel. So the current models you can get, the MacBook Air and the MacBook Pro, they're on the lower end of Apple's lineup. So the MacBook Air is the cheapest one, and then £200 more you get the Pro. But obviously, if you want more, so if you want more ports, if you want 4 Thunderbolt ports, if you want kind of the GPU of the 16-inch MacBook Pro, they're still Intel based. So the higher end MacBook Pro, the 16-inch MacBook Pro, or the iMac Mac Pro, all those things are still Intel based. I assume that Apple has plans to kind of make higher powered M chips, the M2, maybe the M1X or something, kind of naming schemes that's used in the iPad before.
Yeah, so Apple said they're going to take 2 years to transition to Apple Silicon, haven't they? So I think it makes sense to start with the entry level, low performance, but it's going to take a lot more work to do the M2, M3, I don't know what the name is in fiction, but the high end versions. But yeah, it's not going to happen overnight. It's going to be a slow progress, and even then it might still be like lower end Intel options available. We don't know, but like the ARM revolution is happening, but it's going to take time.
Yeah, I think something that you mentioned that really kind of stands out after using this MacBook Air is the battery life advances.
Yep.
I think if the only advancement that this M1 chip had brought to a MacBook Air, MacBook Pro was the far better battery life, if the performance was kind of on par with those Intel chips, if the GPU was on par with those Intel chips, the massive increase in battery life, especially on the MacBook Pro, with the same size batteries as the previous models, would kind of be enough to make people want this laptop.
I agree.
And what do you think about touchscreen, Max? Could that ever be a thing?
I'm sure it could be, yeah, definitely. I've seen plenty of laptops using ARM architecture with using touchscreens. I think it's up to Apple. Does Apple think there's a need for it? Like you use that product more than me. Do you think the MacBook Air would benefit from a touchscreen?
I think Apple trying to bring in these iPad apps, iPhone apps, they feel like they're made for touch. And I think there was even a kind of an image on the App Store that showed someone touching them. I think they quickly took that down. And obviously the MacBook Pro has the Touch Bar,
Yeah.
which is kind of a small strip above the keyboard. It's pretty useless, and it just having that there teases what you could do with a touchscreen. So, that feels like another area that is kind of missing.
Yeah.
So to kind of sum up, Ryan, obviously the MacBook Air, you can only buy a MacBook Air with an M1 chip directly from Apple now. Do you think that people should be wary about picking up Apple's most popular laptop with a chip that's fairly new, or do you kind of feel that everything that we've seen so far shows that Apple was right to make this decision?
I think Apple's right to make the decision. It just makes more sense for Apple. It doesn't, when you're running with Intel or AMD processors, for example, the likes of Dell, Lenovo, Acer, they have to fit their laptop releases with processor releases. So Apple be able to stick to its own launches, stick when it wants to upgrade, having more control over it, it makes sense to me. But it doesn't mean that Intel and AMD laptops are not falling behind necessarily. Obviously the performance is not as great as Apple right now, but they're still going to be competitive. Like, some people don't like macOS. Some people prefer to get a Windows laptop. And I think Intel and AMD are still going to be massive players in the future. Whether they do more to compete with this because obviously Apple's now set the bar higher for performance, battery, etc. Before, when suggesting a MacBook Air, I'd probably only recommend saying it's only good if you really want macOS, because you can get better value laptops elsewhere. Now that's not the case. You can get a MacBook Air that does all the same performance jumps as anything else, if not better. So I think becoming, for example, in the smartphone market, I think Apple's usually got the lead for processors, right?
Yeah.
And yet Samsung
in terms of kind of pure speed.
Yeah. So obviously Samsung's still competitive there. So I think it's just Apple raising its game and be more competitive in Intel and AMD. But yeah, all three processor brands are going to be going strong in the future.
And do you think this will push Windows on ARM to be better? So you had the Surface Pro X, didn't you, last year? A couple from Samsung, running a Snapdragon version, which is again an ARM-based chip. But they had serious kind of compatibility problems. Do you think this will push them to be better?
I think Microsoft, of course, it's definitely a better incentive for Microsoft to get this compatibility right, because if people start going up to MacBook, they're not using Windows. And also, Microsoft has its own skin in the game. It's got the Surface Neo is going to be using, that's intellectuals, but there'll be Microsoft Windows laptops using ARM. So yeah, it definitely wants to get this right, and I think it's pushing as hard as it can. I think it delayed the Surface Neo potentially because of this reason. We don't know for sure, but I think once this is fixed, we don't know how long it will take, but once this is fixed, then I'm sure we'll see plenty more ARM computers coming from the likes of Snapdragon coming into the market and potentially challenging Apple. We'll see.
Yeah, very exciting times ahead, I think. So yeah, thanks everyone for watching, and we'll see you in the next video.
Wish that there was a way that you could get driven to soccer practice instead of having to walk half a mile in this 60-degree weather.
I'm going to guess, this is what Steve's probably going to answer when I ask him. I'm going to guess that Apple has seen scenarios undisclosed we don't know about where this is a better way of doing it. And I think the push probably is more secure. For one thing, an authenticator, the way an authenticator works is with a secret long number. But that number, if it's known by an adversary, you're done. I mean, that's how the
AuthSync was attacked previously. I think
that's right.
If memory serves, yeah.
Yeah. So if somebody can get your secret identity that's stored in that authenticator, they can do the authentication themselves anywhere. It's just a hash between that and the time of day. So I'm guessing they've decided, well, the least secure is SMS. We're never going to let you use that because of SIM swapping. The next least secure is this, this authentication, this time of day authentication standard, because if somebody got access to your secret codes, it's no different than them getting access to your password. You're out of luck. A push is a lot harder to spoof. So I think that's why.
Again, just tell me that. Like, just tell me that you want me to do it this way, and that way I won't expect that it'll work.
Right. Yeah. Really, the thing that I'm most appreciative of the last 2 or 3 years in user interface design is all of the companies. Google certainly, Apple certainly, there are other companies that are kind of similar, where they're not afraid of being verbose and English when they are about to ask you, what do you want to do next? Where it's one thing to hear are 2 radio buttons for your security authentication preferences. That was the way it used to be up until like at least 5 years ago. Now, when I signed up for the new version of the Google Wallet app, it was night and day, because I had to actually read a paragraph and a half of plain English text saying, well, here's what it means if you push this button that says trust me to do this for you, and here's why and you don't have to do that right now. We've clicked we've highlighted the one that says yes, but by all means switch that to do. Really, the solution to the aspirin for a lot of user pain and a lot of Apple's pain is just simply be more verbose, be more clear about here is the ramifications of every single decision we're presenting to you, and if it means that you get a cluttered screen full of text, go for it. Monospace it. Put it in Courier if you want to. It really does help
Mario
solve problems. Yeah.
Cairo. There you go. Wingdings. Let's take a little break. We got more to talk about. Lots more to talk about. Some big moves, executive moves by Apple. But first, a word from Twilio. You're talking about Authy. They are the people behind Authy. They're the people behind all kinds of useful, interesting ways to communicate with your customers. The world's changing fast. You want to stay in touch with customers. That is so important. And you can with Twilio. You can engage customers wherever they are on any channel they want, from text messages to emails, from phone calls to video and more. One single platform. I've been a Twilio user as a hobbyist for years. It's the greatest platform for developers. And it is, don't think just because little Leo uses it, it's not a big deal. Twilio powers 795 billion plus interactions across channels with 5 nines of uptime, 99.999% uptime. They have 3 billion phone numbers available across more than 100 countries. Customers love Twilio. Developers love Twilio because it's easy for them to implement this. Shopify uses Twilio to run their entire global contact center. More than 1 million customers, they use Twilio Flex for that. That's their programmable contact center solution. Blue Apron uses Twilio to power newsletter emails. They use Twilio's SendGrid. Netflix uses Twilio. If you ever do use two-factor on Netflix, that's Twilio. Back end of that. Ride-sharing and contactless delivery services like Lyft and Uber, they connect riders and drivers by text message, of course, using Twilio. Twilio gives you new ways to communicate with your users, and their API is easy to use. It can give you all sorts of new features, ranging from account notifications with text messaging to, chat bots, to securing online accounts with two-factor. Marketing loves using Twilio's SendGrid to send out newsletters, to do campaigns over email. They can build chatbots. They can do text messaging and phone calls. Customer service teams build global contact and support centers with Twilio Flex. And what's important to understand that Twilio is built by developers for developers. It's just a few lines of code. You don't need to be a specialized telecom network engineer. They hide the complexity. If you can already build web apps, you can build apps that can text, call, chat, and video conference. That's why I use Twilio. It's really, as a hobbyist, it's a great way without a lot of advanced knowledge to incorporate these kinds of things. I've been building a chatbot for quite a while. I won't tell the chat room about that. Strengthen your customer relationships by uniting communications across your entire business. It is time to build with Twilio. TWILIO. Twilio.com. Thank you, Twilio, for supporting the Mac Break Weekly folks and our network. And thank you all for supporting us by going to Twilio.com and inquiring about all that. Twilio, it's time to build. I don't know what Apple is building, but they've been busy. They just hired one of the founders of Robinhood. You know, Robinhood, the finance, the app that has been a huge success. Josh Ellman, who actually he'd left Robinhood. He was the vice president of product at Robinhood. He left and became a venture capitalist at Greylock Partners. He led early investments there in Discord and Musical.ly. They have hired him to work on the App Store. Now, he certainly has a lot of experience with apps. Robinhood has been a very successful app. Two of his investments are obviously very successful. He also invested in House Party. So, what do you think they're going to do with Josh Ellman? It's a very high-profile hire.
What did they say, or what's actually going to happen? Which of those questions are you asking?
So what did they say?
Because they say that he's going to work with App Store discoverability, which has been an ongoing issue.
Actually, that's what he said in his announcement tweet. To help customers discover the best apps for them.
Like even basic search stuff that has been a solved problem, like nearest neighbor and fuzzy results, and
Apple
of the search widening.
Yeah.
For some reason, like it just doesn't exist on a lot of like they can handle misspellings now for the last couple of years, which is fantastic. But like there's just so much basic search engine stuff that doesn't seem to be implemented. But I'm sure that's well below his pay grade. I'm sure he's going to be working on fancy ways to get us to go to the Today screen and see more appropriate content for us specifically. But I don't know, like it feels like it's not native to them. Like as much as they get some things, they just don't get search. And they need to populate themselves with people who live, breathe, and were born, like that Bane joke, right? Like, you built to search, but I was born to search. And I don't know how this moves the needle on that.
No, I think Renee's absolutely right. Whenever you see these hires that are announced, especially for Apple, you have to ask what convinced them to leave what they've already got and join Apple. And it can't be, well, I had an opportunity to increase discoverability of apps inside the App Store. So I really think it's his expertise in essentially connecting customers to things that they actually want to buy and actual services that they're going to be actually paying for. So I would guess that his bailiwick is going to stay within the App Store, but mostly it's expertise and a way of thinking. Apple tends to, when Apple hires away someone who is having a hugely successful career, it's not necessarily for their skill set, and it's not even necessarily for their context. It's for their way of thinking. It's part of the. They looked at all the different bees inside their hive mind. They realized they don't have someone who thinks like this, and they need this for the hive.
Meanwhile, they come and they go. Siri's chief architect has left to go to Roku, Brian Pinkerton, where he was going to focus at Roku on technical innovation and strategic software development across the platform. Maybe you'll be able to talk to your Roku. You can already talk to Roku, can't you? I think you can.
Do you say, hey, Roku?
Yeah.
No. You press a button.
It's Google or Amazon, right?
Yeah. So chief architect of Siri until November. Before that, it's chief technology officer at the Chan Zuckerberg Initiative. That's their charity arm. Huh.
That's an odd resume.
Yeah, it is, isn't it? Yeah.
Well, it's his work with A9 that really stands out for me. I think what I see when I look at his LinkedIn is the ability to do really, really large scale integrated projects. If there's a platform that benefits from not having a single distinctive app or single distinctive feature, but having integration so that every single code part of this works and it bounces off every other code part of it, that is Roku, and probably gave him a much bigger playground to play in and more freedom than just managing Siri on Apple.
Yeah.
Can I also say that the fact that one of the chief people who works on Siri felt, although it was cool to leave, it does make me start to ask questions about what is going on with Siri development inside of Apple. Yeah. That did he see that he didn't have as big a future there as he would have at Roku, or is Apple doing a big pivot on Siri, either putting a lot more money in or even just sort of scaling it back or rolling it into something else? He would start to work under a different boss. It's a lot. It's just as fun as guessing about the next series of Apple Silicon Macs as trying to figure out why did they make that move, Rook to Queensbrook 4 or whatever. Why did you make that move? And Could be a
Well,
simple
they did
reason.
move
Could
Sebastian over, right? Like Sebastian was
Yeah.
vice president of QNX, and then he was running CoreOS, and then he was running Camera. And now at WWDC, they announced that he's running intelligence, like device intelligence, which seems to have a huge overlap with Siri.
Yeah.
And he looks like one of the next generation Craig Federighi's who gets dropped into whatever project is critical at the time. Like he's the one who got a lot of the camera stuff to ship when it was running a bit behind, and he's the one who started nailing down all the security stuff. And now he's the one who drove a lot of the new stuff we're seeing with device intelligence at DubDub. So he seems highly effective, at least, and maybe that was a different environment than what was previously there.
We spent a long time on Twitter on Sunday talking about the issue of Apple suppliers trying to move out of China, the difficulties they're facing in China, both because of the trade war, but also because of, public relations war they're also losing. Apple has been apparently lobbying for some changes in a bill that's passed the House, the Uyghur Forced Labor Prevention Act, passed the House by 406 to 3. So there's pretty strong unilateral support of this.
In 2020.